It's said that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is that the case for this story, though? Or is there a modest way to explain the horrible cruelty and abominable evil done to black people by the Nazis? While most people are familiar with the horrors the Nazis unleashed upon the Jews, fewer people are aware that they also targeted numerous other ethnic groups. Driven by their twisted ideology of racial superiority, the Nazis subjected black people to unspeakable torture and suffering. The Nazis' persecution of black people was a dark stain on humanity, and I'm going to shed a light on that stain right here, right now, in this video. So why were black people persecuted? The Nazis believed that black people were a huge threat to the purity of their race, and that mingling with the blacks would corrupt them. That was due to a crazy ideology of superiority that didn't start yesterday. After Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany on January 30th, 1933, his Nazi dictatorship immediately started to restrict the civil and human rights of Jews and other people considered to be enemies of the state. The administration targeted Afro-Germans too, who were among the so-called enemies of the state. Even though the Nazis did not have a systematic plan to exterminate them, several black people in Germany and German-occupied countries suffered horrific torture, sometimes even to the point of death. The Nazis and their racist propaganda painted the black soldiers as rapists of German women and carriers of venereal diseases, among other accusations. This was the beginning of the marginalization and persecution of black people in Germany. Black people in Germany experienced social and economic isolation under the Nazi era, as well as restrictions from going to the university. These restrictions and discrimination made it impossible for them to get good jobs, except for a few menial ones. Hilarius Gilges, a black dancer and communist activist from Dusseldorf, born in 1909, was one such example. Gilges, who was one of the few black Germans to have been born in the nation before World War I, joined the German Communist Youth in the middle of the 1920s. He was detained in 1931 for his radical political views and given a one-year prison term. However, his communist activism continued after his release in 1932. When Hitler came to power in 1933, Hilarius got detained again, but this time, he didn't get released, and sadly, his body was discovered under a bridge the next day. Incidents like this happened every day, and the Nazis didn't only harm black people, they also aimed to prevent them from reproducing. So let me tell you about the forced sterilization program of Rhineland. In Rhineland, an area in western Germany, there were 600 to 800 multiracial babies born during the Weimar period. The Weimar period was the period after World War I until the rise of Nazi Germany. They referred to these babies as Rhineland bastards in the German media, and so, due to their mixed-race parents, these kids had a complicated place in the Weimar community. These kids frequently suffered social exclusion, including bigotry from their neighbors, fellow students, and even members of their own families. Others were either adopted or placed in children's homes, while some stayed with their biological moms or families. In 1937, 385 of these kids underwent forced sterilization. One of the few teenagers who later shared his ordeal in an interview was named Harris Hawk. Other than him, few people are recognized by name, and little is known about the effects of sterilization on their lives. None of these 385 victims of forced sterilization received compensation from the German government, and the human geneticists didn't face any form of justice. But as horrible as forced sterilization sounds, this was not as ridiculous as the race laws that were enacted to give the regime even more legal strength against black people. In 1935, the Nazis initiated the Nuremberg laws, consisting of two laws. The first was the Reich Citizenship Law, which had the goal to deny political rights to those whom the dictatorship deemed to be genetically inferior, particularly Jews, Roma, and black people. The second law was the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor, which essentially states that it was against the law for black people to wed people of German or related blood. The intention was to stop black people from being married to Germans and having children with them. The next horrific treatment by the Nazis on the blacks involved the concentration camps. To me, these things will always be the height of man's inhumanity and abject cruelty. The Nazis locked up numerous Americans, including some African Americans, as enemy aliens throughout Germany and German-occupied Europe. Joseph Nassy was one such example. He was a black expatriate of Jewish ancestry and had a US passport. As an enemy, Joseph was detained in German-occupied Belgium in 1942. Sadly, the Belgium Beverloo transit camp became his home for the next 7 months. Later, he was moved to Germany, where he spent the remainder of the war at the Upper Bavarian detention camp Laufen and its sub-camp Tittmoning. During a total of 3 years in several concentration camps, Joseph produced a distinctive visual record of more than 200 paintings and drawings. A good number of these pieces portrayed the day-to-day lives of those living in the camps. By the beginning of 1945, Laufen and Tittmoning concentration camps had 850 persons detained in them, with 12 black males having either the American or British passports. Freddie Johnson, an African-American horn and piano performer, was one of Tittmoning's hostages. By the mid-1930s, Nazi authorities had outlawed all foreign, non-Aryan music in Germany, including jazz, which was considered immoral by Nazi ideology. However, this did not stop musicians like Freddie Johnson in December of 1941, who was arrested in German-occupied Amsterdam. Fortunately, a prisoner exchange program in February 1944 resulted in Johnson's freedom from the camp. However, jazz music would occasionally be audible in the camps throughout German-occupied Europe, despite the harsh conditions for inmates. For many, their survival was accredited to their musical ability. Black soldiers who fought for the Allied forces in World War II against Nazi Germany fared much worse as prisoners of war than those who were interned among white people. The German troops imprisoned and mistreated black prisoners of war and did not follow the rules of the Geneva Convention. Black soldiers from the American, French, and British armies were either mistreated in concentration camps or worked to death on construction sites. The few inmates who survived months and years of torture, malnutrition, and hard work frequently needed care. Leon Bass, an African-American soldier who participated in the liberation of Buchenwald concentration camp by American forces in April 1945, had the following to say. "And I saw what I can refer to now as the Walking Dead. I saw human beings there that had been beaten and starved and tortured and so mistreated that they were nothing but human skeletons. They were skin and bone, and they had those skeletal faces with the deep-set eyes, and their heads had been clean-shaved, and they were standing there, holding on to one another, and they were so thin." The ordeal that the black people had to go through in the name of racism, superiority restrictions, segregation, and control is quite unspeakable. The deeds of the Nazis left an indelible imprint that cannot be erased. Today, the impact of the Nazi regime's persecution of black people can still be seen in the form of racism and discrimination. Black people in Germany and across Europe continue to face discrimination in employment, housing, and education. Let this story remind us to fight against all forms of racism and discrimination. In the United States, you could be African American, or Irish American, or Scottish American. But throughout most of Europe, there are no hyphenates, meaning that if you appear black, that's exactly how you're seen and exactly how you're treated. Lastly, let me wholeheartedly recommend the Netflix movie Where Hands Touch as I round up this video. This movie is about interracial love during the Nazi regime, and I firmly believe that it will help you comprehend some of the realities of what this regime has done even more. And as selfish as this is going to sound, please do me a favor and remember to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. That way we can continue pushing out content that helps other people stay informed and learn about all these atrocities. Every like, every mention, every subscription helps us stay open and informing the public. And, as always, I would like to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for choosing to spend your time with us today when you could be doing a million other things. So, thank you everybody. We'll see you in our next video.